We're here now with Pat McCormack, the President of the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association. Pat, thanks very much for coming into us.
Thank you, Claire.
So, Pat, last week the government launched its Climate Action Report 2019. It sets out ambitious targets for agricultural emissions to get them down by 10 to 15% by 2030. What's your response to the report initially, and is that target achievable? Is it realistic?
Well, first of all, Claire, it is a target. And I mean, agriculture is no different to any other sector or anything else in life. You must always set targets. We must go as close as we possibly can to achieving those targets. They are ambitious. There's no point in saying otherwise. There's particular elements of those targets that are ambitious. In particular, I suppose, the forestry, the expectation of the target that's out there, that we'd plant in and around 8,000 hectares of forestry per annum, when we are only at 4,500 at this point in time. So that's going to be a target that's going to be very, very ambitious to deliver on. Obviously the Tegas Met curve is going to have a significant impact, and hopefully that will deliver, whether it's the low emission slurry spreading, the protected urea, and also EBI obviously from the dairy herd, and indeed from the beef offspring from the dairy herd as well. We saw ICBF this spring launched the beef index for the dairy herd, and we'll hope that will deliver as well to help bring down our emissions overall.
And Pat, are there concerns among your members about a possible cap on production following the implementation of this plan? Because the Minister for Agriculture has stated that farmers need to engage with this plan, or else other measures might be taken. So are you concerned about a cap on production, or that, down the line, could the dairy herd be limited? Could the national herd be limited?
Well, look, who knows? I suppose the Minister at this point in time has given a commitment that there won't be individual caps. I think that would be a retrograde step. As somebody who's not that long gone from being a young farmer, and certainly in European terms not gone from being a young farmer that long, and there's a lot of farmers out there in their 40s, but they've given the last 30 years living in the shackles of quotas. I think from an Irish dairy industry perspective, to be very, very difficult to see us go back into the shackles of an environmental restriction. So hopefully that won't happen. I think economics will dictate a lot, and I think there needs to be a huge programme out there amongst consumers, and awareness amongst consumers that we're top of the range from an animal welfare perspective, and that we're doing more and more over the last 25, 30 years. Farmers have invested significantly in their farmyard layouts and infrastructure, obviously to become labour-wise more efficient, but to become environmentally more compatible. And that awareness needs to be out there for consumers, that all this comes at a cost for the producer, and at some point in time that the producer won't be able to withstand any more of those costs, and that the burden is going to have to be shared.
So that awareness among the consumer, is it there?
I'm afraid there's an environmental awareness there amongst the consumer, but there isn't an economic awareness, and by that I mean that they don't understand that there's a significant cost associated with being ever so compliant. I mean, is it there within Europe, Claire? We see us sitting down here today to talk about climate change and the targets and the ambitions for the future, and at the same time we have Commissioner Hogan in Europe talking about closing out a Mercosur deal with no restrictions, bringing in cheap food, and that is a huge concern, not alone for Irish beef, but indeed for European beef.
So there's massive contradictions out there, I suppose. On the ground, that's what the farmers are feeling.
Farmers are saying to me that it's hypocritical, absolutely hypocritical, that they're saying implementing one thing and agreeing a different thing in a Mercosur deal, and that has to be vetoed if necessary by our Taoiseach. And I would encourage the Minister for Agriculture to have a word in his ear, because we have the power here at home in Ireland to veto that deal.
And Pat, just back on the climate report, forestation is a big piece of the puzzle here. It's going to play a huge part. Minister Creed has said that he doesn't want the afforestation to take place in any one particular part of the country, not in areas where maybe the land is more disadvantaged. Are dairy farmers out there open to the idea of planting a section of good quality grassland, for opening that up for forestry to help get emissions down?
Well, I suppose the farmers, certainly dairy farmers, have more of a stake in the environmental ambitions than anybody else. Obviously water quality and that. Milking platform is the one restrictor for the dairy farm. So I think the vast majority of dairy farmers should be a no-go area to be planting some of that ground that's around the milking parlour. for forestry, but maybe they may have marginal land, but maybe they may have a neighbour who's not as profitable as they could be in another enterprise, and maybe there's an opportunity there for farmers in less profitable and maybe, you know, age profile and all that, it might suit them. Maybe they're part-time farmers, you know, but ultimately forestry needs to be seen as attractive. It needs to be seen as attractive financially, and it also needs to be seen as attractive long-term, because unfortunately in the past we've seen mature forestry harvested and then left to wreck and ruin for years after it.
You mentioned, Pat, about the slurry application changes there and changes in terms of fertiliser management under this new plan. How will that impact on the ground?
Well, you know, I suppose there's a huge challenge out there, and we've seen it with irrigation farmers, you know, for the remainder of 2019, to have the low emission slurry equipment available locally and at a time to spread the slurry for the farmers. Obviously, it can have a significant impact. You know, there's 2,500, maybe nearer to 3,000 applications gone through the TAM scheme now. But you know, if the government had to be serious about it, I think the rate of grant aid should be increased to 60%, because you know those spreaders are twice the cost of a conventional spreader for the farmer, and to make them viable for the farmer as well as the contractor. You know, protected urea. We've been lobbying co-ops, obviously, on mill price. It's the number one for ICMSA, but after that, you know, it's environmental issues. And that all those co-ops and various different fertiliser suppliers would have in stock the protected urea at a competitive price. That's to be a critical part of it as well, because, you know, in some areas, it's not made available to farmers.
Pat, finally, the carbon tax, the government has said that is going to be increased from €20 per tonne up to €80 per tonne by 2030, where there's an equalisation on duties on petrol and diesel, a ban on diesel cars coming down the line. You know, that's all going to have indirect impacts on farmers. Does the ICMSA accept the government's position on those issues, and what's the ICMSA going to do about it?
Well, you know, we're going to lobby very, very strongly that farmers and rural people need their diesel cars. They need, you know, to be in a position to take stock to the factory, to go to the co-op, and they need to have power in their engine. That's not available in the alternatives, unfortunately. The sustainability of the charge on the battery, from what I've heard from the experts, wouldn't maintain over a period of time. What we would be looking for, though, is that the microenergy would be encouraged and promoted in the budget 2020, which is coming up in the autumn, where solar panels, for example, would be a viable option on the sheds and infrastructure that are out there in the farmyards of rural Ireland. And it is initiatives like that may make farm families viable in the years ahead.
Pat, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us.